Mic check, mic check. Let me know that you all can hear me. Give me a thumbs up. Turn your camera on, say hi. Just let me know you all can see me. Try it one more time. Mic check, mic check. All right, Victor gave me a thumbs up. Appreciate you. We'll be getting started shortly. We got about 2 to 3, maybe 4 more minutes left, more or less. So everybody just hang out for a little bit and we'll get started promptly around 4:02 for the East Coast and 1:02 for the West Coast. All right, all right. We're going to get started. Just to let me know that everybody's connected, you can hear me. Open up the chat that's in Zoom and let me know what school you're at, what school you're attending, what state you're in if you're not attending school. But just let me know how things are going. So everybody in the chat, let me know where you're representing before we get this thing started. There's a chat button, and all you got to do is type in what school you're at or what state you live in. There we go. We got somebody from City College in New York. All right, San Diego State. That's what's up. Ohio graduate. Texas Christian University. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Well, let me first of all welcome everyone to today's session hosted by the Career Center. In today's lab, we are going to be talking about, let me see where the slide goes. All right, hopefully everybody can see the slide. What's the best tech interviews have in common? With me, Bobby Dorless, I'll be your host this evening or afternoon if you're in the West Coast. But in general, we're going to have a conversation about what are some of the skills and what are the things that I've noticed over the years have been common especially for interview candidates that have successfully gone through the process of interviewing with me or going through some corporation interview that I've worked for in the past. Today's topic, we'll just jump into the agenda. I'm going to quickly just, introduce myself if you haven't had a chance to meet me yet. Definitely find a way to get on my calendar and get some time with me if you're in the interview process or you just want to chat up and talk about tech. Feel free to always reach out. And then bullet point number 2 is best tips to succeed in your technical interview. And then we're going to have a question and answer section at the end. Now, for the question and answer section, I definitely am looking for a volunteer to help me read off any questions in the chat room. I can't do 2 things at once, but if anybody's brave enough to lend that support when we get there, please raise your hand. So just to start off with some introductions, my name is Bobby Dorless. I'm a technical career coach here at CodePath. But before starting my time of mentoring and coaching here at CodePath, I worked in the industry for a number of years. I worked for this really cool social media company that you all may know. It's the one with the little blue bird. So I worked at Twitter for a number of years as a site reliability engineer, which really has a focus on systems engineering as one skill set, but also software engineering. So I got two and many more skill sets that I bring to the table. But when we're talking about software engineering, the coding languages that I'm most proficient at is Python, Golang, and Bash. Bash is the one that's at the terminal. And if you didn't know, Bash is actually a coding language. We can have our conversations about that, but definitely feel free to get on my calendar and chat up some more about my journey and overall looking forward to connecting with everybody. But today's topic, where we're going to really focusing on, is the best tips to succeed in a technical interview. Now, just so that we can get some audience participation, inside the chat room, let me know how many technical interviews you have been to. And I mean actual company interviews, either it's an online assessment, sitting down talking with a recruiter, and in general, give me a number inside the chat room. Let me know how many interviews you attended. Fortunately, some people have none yet. That's all right. That's no worries, no worries. Well, we'll get through that. Anybody else? There we go. Another none yet as well. We got one person that's had one. Awesome, awesome. Now, don't feel bad at all if you haven't had any technical interviews. This is what I'm here for, to give you some gifts and on this journey that you're on. Somebody's been 10 since August. Oh, we definitely need to have a conversation, especially if you've had this many interviews, because you have developed some skill sets that I'm hoping I can help you sharpen a little bit. But in general, definitely feel free to reach out. But the reason why I'm asking this is that having interviews with companies is one way to work on the skill set. But also, if you have a chance to do mock interviews, mock interviewing is definitely at that same frequency. And I'm not going to have it here as a bullet point for a tip, but definitely feel free to reach out to the Career Center and we can give you some more support in mock interviewing. But one of the first tips that I want to talk about today about technical interviewing, more specifically around just the interview process. So actually, I'll step back. Before we actually talk about the tips, I'm going to talk about what the interview process looked like so that you all can understand it, especially if you haven't had a chance to. So from a technical or a technologist perspective, or someone that's been in the industry for a while and have definitely interviewed at a number of places, interviews usually happen in this way. There is some initial reach out. An initial reach out could be maybe a phone conversation. It could be a LinkedIn ping from a recruiter, or an email from a company introducing themselves and also letting you know the different type of opportunities they have. This is usually your first time having a conversation with the company. Most of the times you're excited because I can't believe this company is calling me, asking me about an opportunity. And definitely I want you to celebrate those moments. But soon after the initial contact, either through a phone call or reach out through LinkedIn or email, is actually getting into the recruiting process or the interviewing process. Sometimes this happens during that first initial phone call, and recruiters have been trained in some capacity to actually ask some technical questions during this phase. This is an opportunity for you to be prepared, mindset-wise, energy-wise, and just be thinking about tech and representing yourself in the best light. Because remember, they're looking at your resume and definitely talking or would have conversations off of that. But after that initial phone conversation with the recruiter or the first line of engagement with the company, you'll quickly move on to the next phase. And this is the technical interviewing phase. Now, some companies do it different. Some companies all do the same, but it's usually a way for us to assess your current skill sets based on the position we have open. And that's the way that I like to describe what technical interviewing is. We're assessing your current skill sets with the position that we have open. Now, how do we assess your current skill sets? Most of you may have encountered companies using online assessments to measure your proficiency in writing code, either getting to code complete and successfully passing some unit tests, all under some stress in terms of around timing. Hey, you got to finish this within 60 minutes. But that usually encompasses technical interviewing and one of the first engagements you will have on the technical side. If you're able to get through that and definitely move on to the next phase, and or maybe the first phase is an actual technical conversation with someone like me, someone that's either a member of the team that you're interviewing for, or some companies use technical leaders to assess entry-level positions and ultimately just in a generic way provide some input into who can move on to the next level based on their technical skill sets. Now, this is the conversation that you're going to be having with engineers, technologists that are more or less want to talk about the keyboard, want to talk about coding in terms of maybe even having a coding exercise to write code, solving a problem, or reviewing code, giving some feedback on existing code, or even actually talking about tech, which we'll get some more into in the tips area. Usually after this phase of the interview, you usually move on to potentially on-site conversations where companies will fly you to their location and have you actually do on-site, or which is more common is the next round of interviews via Zoom call. They could be technical, but they can also be focused on behavioral. You maybe even have an opportunity to meet the hiring manager and have a conversation with that individual. But in general, that's usually the next phase before we move on to any type of offer. So if you haven't had a chance to go through the technical interview process, that's usually the breakdown of what happens in those conversations. But today's conversation, we really are focusing on the tips, like what are the key things that I've noticed over the years that I've had an opportunity to engage with candidates and see them be successful in an interview process. Now, if you need some more context about the interview process, please feel free to reach out to the Career Center. We're always here to support and definitely give you some insights. But one of the first tips that I want to talk to you all about is actually a gym, because I have a story that I'm going to tell you all about a candidate that took the extra effort of researching the company, which allowed this candidate to maybe not do so well in other areas, but because of this tip, was able to move forward in the interview process. Now, what do I mean by researching the company? Now, we're talking about you're in the pipeline, you're engaged with a recruiter, you have a technical interview ready and lined up, it's scheduled for Friday. Researching the company before you interview is a valuable conversation point that most people don't even realize how much we're looking forward to having a conversation about the company and finding out what you've learned on the outside compared to what we know as an interviewer, and we can relate to you in terms of how it is at the company. Now, the story I'm going to tell you is around a candidate that was interviewing for somewhat of a Fortune 500 company. It was a company called Citrix Systems. And one thing that really caught my ear during the interview is the in-depth research that the candidate did on a service that we were offering at this company at Citrix. Now, I was interviewing candidates throughout the week, and I never had a chance to really get that deep into a conversation until this candidate brought it up. And this is the key thing about researching a company, is it really shows how enthusiastic you are about the opportunity. It shows how much time you put in to really understand the value system, because it wasn't only, hey, you're working on this type of service in terms of the candidate bringing to light, but it was also the candidate was like, hey, I found this post about your value system and the things that engineering principles that you all abide by. Can you give me some more insights into XYZ? That was something that required you to do a little bit more research to find out that the company I was working for had this practice, published it externally, and you found it and was able to bring it up in a conversation meaning an interview, is extremely powerful. And eventually that candidate was hired on at that company. He did well doing other exercises and with other engineers, but that was the one thing I provided in feedback when I was writing my feedback for the interview, is that the time the candidate spent on researching the company enlightened me on what their potential um, experience would be as a coworker or on the team that I was working on. And remember, researching the company doesn't mean that you know what their last quarter numbers were or what products they're releasing, but really just understanding how and about the company. Like, what is the value system about the company? Or is there anything unique about their engineering practices or services that they're offering? Or even direction that's been given. Like, I've known, directors and VP kind of publish externally, these are our mission and the things that we're working towards. These are nuggets that companies are leaving and putting out there for people to research and bring it up during interview. And what I'm really trying to emphasize here is that taking the extra effort to getting yourself familiarized with the company and opportunity in terms of position wise, roles, responsibility, can really give you an upper hand, and be something that uplifts you, especially if you have challenges in other areas during the interview. So if you're not doing this, I hope that you add this to your practice in terms of preparing for your interview. And it doesn't need to be a week worth of research paper that you're writing. It could be a few hours of combing their website, looking in their social media platform profiles, looking on LinkedIn to see if you can connect who works with who. But in general, that will definitely be a tip and an upper hand when you're having a conversation with someone like me and technologists at other companies evaluating candidates. Now, the next thing that I want to really talk about, which is sometimes challenging for candidates that haven't interviewed at a company before, or you're just getting new and into the industry, is discussing and talking about tech. Especially if you're talking to a technologist, an engineer, someone that's working hands on the keyboard. We love talking about tech. We enjoy talking about tech. We actually rather be talking about tech than actually quote unquote interviewing you, right? And this is one of those moments where I want you to really think about starting to index technology and things that you have been exposed to, used, are passionate about, and really bringing them to light when you're discussing and talking about tech. Now, the example I'm going to bring up is an engineer that also went through an interview process, and I had a pleasure of interviewing this candidate. And she, during our interview, brought up a technology that was kind of shelved. We've already kind of deprecated and moved on from, but we had a blog post that was sitting online about the efficiency and the technical implementation for that specific service. And it wasn't something that everyone would have found. This is another research in the company. But finding this blog post gave her a conversation point, because when we interviewed, or when she interviewed, we talked about tech probably 90% of the interview. She brought up this blog post and started to talk about some of the things that she did not understand and or areas that she wanted to collaborate a little bit more to get a more insightfulness. And the key thing that I'm bringing up in this story is that we were discussing and talking about tech, and we were just having a conversation and being able to bring up a technology that I was familiar with, because the thing that the candidate didn't know is that I wasn't one of the co-authors, but I was one of the co-proofreaders per se, before that blog post was posted. So I was very well aware of the technology she was talking about. And that nugget itself was something that I personally seen, and something that I differentiate her in terms of that interview cycle than all the other candidates, is her ability to talk about tech and really be passionate about it. That's another thing that when you're talking about tech, we're listening and looking for is your passion. It's, yes, you may have an experience with this software or that software, but when we start talking about this framework, or let's say we're starting to talk about something front end React, you're passionate about why you prefer React over Angular JS, right? It's like finding those type of conversation points, and especially when it's talking about tech, are going to be valuable in your interview process. And really just something that we, in terms of interviewers, are always looking for is just having a discussion. Now, how do you develop these skills? That's a question that a lot of cohorts here at CodePath have asked me in the past. And it does require time and effort. When you're talking about technology, we like to, in terms of just those that have been in the industry, is talk about bleeding edge technology, stuff that's brand new. If we're in an interview and we talking about AI, hopefully we would talk about Chat GPT, right? Or if we're talking about blockchain and just understanding the technology, I'm hoping we can talk about Ethereum and Bitcoin. Like we're talking about tech. These are bleeding edge type technologies. Is always making sure you're keeping your ears to the streets is what I'm really getting to, is that you're always following along of what is going on in the industry. Now, how do you follow along? And this is like, how do you really have effective conversations and interviews? By following along, keeping your ears on the streets, but how do you follow along? One of the tools that I use is newsletters. I sign up for all kinds of newsletters on the internet, and definitely find myself browsing through my inbox to read through newsletters so I can see what's the newest technology, conversation points, right? Signing up for blog posts, finding technologists or engineers in the industry that I admire, or they could be my mentor in the sense of they don't know that they're my mentor, but I'm following their story and subscribing to publications or subscribing to their GitHub repository. Like, just imagine how much information is out there that you can be exposed to always be talking about tech. You just got to put yourself in those environments. I know that most of you are studying, doing lead code, coding, but this is something that you have to do on the side to continue to develop this skill set around being, interested in talking about tech. And I'm saying skill set where it's not really a skill set. I would say it's just something that I've learned over the years is if you don't stay sharp, you get left behind. So you always got to be listening to the streets and what technologies are iterating towards. So in general, the TLDR about this slide here is accessing blog posts, newsletters, YouTube, watching what the industry does, especially if it's bleeding edge technology in your niche specifically, to either its front end, iOS development, Android, or back end development. Just knowing what's going on will definitely make you a more upper hand in terms of the conversations that we will have with other candidates in that circle. So definitely keep that in mind as you're talking about discussing tech. Now, the next slide that I'm bringing up is a slide that I bring up, and I didn't even really put no words in terms of giving it a title because everybody knows that you're going to have to do some type of coding, or most of the time do coding. A lot of companies, well, not a lot of companies, there's a few companies that, hey, they don't even do any coding, and they basically are hiring you based on behavioral or technical conversations. There are definitely those opportunities out there. Majority of the companies you interview will have some type of coding assessment. But the key thing that I want to bring up in this slide here is not that you can just write code, not that you can just pass the unit test, not that you can, get code complete, but can you effectively explain your code? And this is the key point in terms of a tip, is being able to explain your code effectively is something that you may not be aware of, but it is a skill that you have to continue to develop. Just as much as you're practicing solving lead code problems, practice talking about how you solved the problem or why you chose certain solutions. The key thing that I'm bringing up here is most of the time when you write code, at least with me, I'm going to ask you to iterate. I'm going to ask you to, how can we make this more efficient? Why did you make this decision point versus that decision point? And you may find developers that will knock it out like this, but they can't talk about why and why they did this or the decision points and being able to explain the reasons why, if you do this, this is the outcome. Being able to effectively explain code like it's on screen is extremely powerful during interviewing because we're going to continue to dig. So if you're not developing and continue to sharpen the skill set in terms of talking about why and how you developed or decided to do this decision point, and I mean talking out loud in some capacity. I mean, if I could think about it, I'm even just thinking in terms of just like role playing an interviewer asking me why I decided to do X, Y, Z in a lead code problem, right? That's the level of practice that I want to make sure you are practicing and showcasing during an interview, is talking about your code. Not just, hey, yeah, I chose this variable over that. No. The decision points, like why did you use this data structure versus another data structure? Like those type of in-depth analysis of your codes are very key during an interview and can also put you in good contents for an open position we have. All right. The next point that I want to cover is we don't have this opportunity as much, and more specifically about whiteboarding and talking about complex ideas or communicating. This really leads off of our last slides when I'm saying about being able to talk about code in that light. But when I'm talking about being able to communicate complex ideas, is like being able to continue the conversation beyond the code that you've written. Like some of you may actually have interviews around designing systems, saying, hey, we want to have this web application do this. We want to have this RESTful API do that. We may have some load balancers, reverse proxies. We may even have a database, why we're choosing a database system. Like maybe we should use a NoSQL versus a SQL database, being able to explain the difference between the two, being able to talk about replication and how we would not lose data if we replicate it from one site to the other, like being able to communicate complex ideas. We're talking about beyond coding and just really starting to develop an insightfulness on why you choose certain decisions and finding the best medium for you to communicate. Now, I bold the word communicate here because beyond anything, if any top lesson that I want to make sure you learn is that you being able to communicate is your most effective way to get a job. Communicate, talk it, say it out loud. And if it is a complex problem, be confident in it. It's okay if you're wrong, but communicating is what we use to understand where you're at on that ladder or on that gauge of your current skill sets. But more specifically about being able to communicate complex ideas, it's a value system that we have in this industry, and especially when you're a part of a team, is being able to get up on the whiteboard, or if it's online design or drawing, and being able to get your ideas in that form is very powerful, especially when you're showcasing your skill sets during interviewing. Now, how do you practice this, right? One thing that I do find is limited resources on developing the skills around system design. And there are definitely a few resources, and I can email them out afterwards. But one of the key things that I really feel when I'm having interview conversations around system design and these complex systems or complex ideas is most of the candidates have seen it before. And this is the part, especially if you're new. Keyword is they've seen it before. We're having a conversation. Oh yeah, I've seen this design strategy because I've read this somewhere, or I've seen someone do this, or I worked in an environment that I did it. We don't use system designs for entry-level positions most of the time, but you will find there may be conversations that come up. So I'm preparing you. And remember, these are general skill sets that'll carry you beyond your first opportunity and as you go on in the future. But the key thing that I'm getting to about these complex ideas and how you're able to feel confident to communicate this is developing skills and putting in the time and effort. Either you work in the environment doing it, or you've read and researched online about this technology or about this type of implementation to be able to speak complex or being able to speak at this level that I'm talking about. So in general, communication is number one, but being able to effectively communicate complex ideas is a key for you to weed yourself out of the candidates that are in the pool. Now, the last thing that I do want to talk about a tip. And this one, I didn't put any words there because this image right here, when I found it online, really reaffirms what I want to emphasize. And the fact that the candidate is sitting upright, sitting forward, very engaged in the conversation is being able to ask questions. Now, it may seem simple for me to say, but I hope you all are practicing, especially in the behavioral section of whatever you're practicing in terms of just your talking and communicating effectively, is asking questions when the opportunity is there is one of those moments that it really brings home the idea of how passionate, how committed, how interested the candidate is about the company. I can recall a number of times that I've interviewed candidates working at Twitter, and we get to the point where we've gone through the tech, we've gone through a coding exercise, we're at the end, we got about 20 minutes left, and I ask, do you have any questions to the candidate? And a candidate says, nah, I don't have no questions. For me, that's like, nah, I'm not interested in the company. Nah, I don't want to know nothing else. Like, always be prepared to ask these questions and sit upright when you're doing and be intrigued in the conversation. Whenever you're in that point of the interview where you're able to ask questions, there's something that I teach cohorts here at CodePath, is that this is your chance, the candidate, the young man sitting there with the white shirt and the tie, to interview the company. So yes, sit up, ask your question, and really ask questions that are passionate towards you, because the person on the other receiving end may be blown out of their mind about, wow, I can't believe the candidate wanted to know that. Man, I can only imagine what else they have in mind, right? Or what they could bring to the table just by asking questions. Now, it could be questions around culture at the office, questions around work, not work ethics, but work, the way that work is assigned, or the way that, you know, you handle they handle meetings or project assignments. A question could be like, how do they support a new intern or a new employee on the group or on the team? Questions would be like around like, what is the promotion process? I know I'm thinking already far ahead, but in general, these type of questions are really engaging and just opens up the conversation highway per se, and you are in control. Now, how do you prepare for this? You prepare for this by practicing asking questions. You prepare for this by preparing and practicing the behavioral section of interviewing. Like, I already have questions queued up in my mind that I've practiced over and over in different type of companies. And based on this, the answer from the company, I may be interested in working for them if they offer me the position, or they might answer it and I'm like, nah, I don't want to work for a company like that, right? But in general, practicing those type of questions will make you feel comfortable, just like this young gentleman here, to ask his questions at the end of the interview. And this is very key, because you don't want to walk away and not ask questions. That usually means, nah, I don't think this is the opportunity for me. But it could be that one extra thing that you need to get you across the finish line in terms of getting this opportunity. So ask them questions and be confident. Don't be afraid to ask questions. There's no dumb questions. All right, so we are at the question section, quote unquote, no pun intended, of our webinar or our workshop today. And definitely want to look through the questions here. I know I asked for a volunteer, so I don't know if there are anyone that wants to volunteer and help me read these questions, and or if anyone wants to come up on the mic. All right, go ahead. Gable, is that how you pronounce it? Yes, no, maybe so. I'm gonna give it 2 more seconds. Nope. If you have your mic on, I can't hear you. That's GLAB.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
All right, so should I ask questions? What should I do?
All right. In general, if you do have access to the chat, you can read off the questions that came in. And if anybody raises their hand, just let me know which order they came in to ask their question.
Okay. So there's one question. Is it appropriate to talk about Glassdoor review during the end of the interview? So I don't think so.
Yeah, that's actually a good question. So the question is it okay to talk about Glassdoor interview feedback during the interview? So Glassdoor is definitely a public platform that candidates that have gone through the interview process, or employees that provide feedback about the interview process, publishes publicly. It's not something that the company says, yes, that's what our interview process is. And I don't think personally it is the right place for you to bring up things that specifically started off from Glassdoor into the interview, because you may hit a nerve and or speak on something that's not that's irrelevant. So I personally wouldn't say, hey, I got this question from Glassdoor. But if it's something that's really passionate to you, is finding in a way that framing that question that comes from you so that you can get more clarity. So I wouldn't say, hey, I got this question from this blog post. Can you answer and rebuttal the comments here? But maybe something in the light of, hey, I've been thinking about this type of situation. Have this so-and-so happen at your company before, so on and so forth. That's my preferred approach, and definitely something that I would tread lightly, especially just saying, hey, I got this from Glassdoor. All right, looks like we got one person raised their hand. Go ahead and open your mic and introduce yourself. Oh, no, they put
All right, hello.
Oh, no, there we go.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so I had a question about, I don't know, the topic of AI is a little bit touchy these days. So with the recent layoffs and whatnot, I do want to be careful about, working with companies that might, use AI to, I guess, essentially replace me in 6 months. So the question is, how would you kind of ask, how a company would use AI without, I guess, offending the recruiter?
For sure, for sure. And that's a really good question. You're gonna really stretch my brain a little bit to come up with a response. But I will say that, and this is just from my professional opinion, if you've not looked at, done some research, and really understand what trajectory the industry is headed in with AI, please go do some research. Everyone should. Now, your question kind of leans on the side of AI replacing software engineer, replacing your role. I personally, professionally, don't think we're there yet. But the key word is, I don't think we're there yet. Now, how much more time do we have? There is going to be a few iterations for our jobs to be gone, because one of the skill sets that I think in terms of engineers we're going to have to develop is being able to write complementary code to test out the results of whatever AIs are building. So we're going to still need software engineering skills to test out output or test out what AIs are doing. So I don't think it's as soon as you think it is, but it's definitely something for us all to keep an eye on. And I'm just speaking professionally. Now, when you're talking with companies and a company has an interest in AI and talking about how AI is used as a resource, I can 100% see a value system that companies would use to implementing AI in some capacity. In terms of deliverable, in terms of the actual hard work that us software engineers do, but other lanes too, in terms of copywriting, writing memos, writing, designing, designing, just whatever work that designers do, all of us are at risk in some capacity. But I don't think that we should use or see that as something that's going to take our job. It's going to be something that's complementary to us. Because the thing that AI is missing, and this is on my technologist hat, is that the experience is what makes us, in terms of human beings, make AIs useful. AIs will have a wealth of knowledge, but if you don't have the experience to say, hey, I need to implement XYZ for this type of reason, AIs will execute, but an individual or person still needs to provide that type of prompt or input. So I wouldn't be as hesitant to continue to pursue this career, pursue this field. I wouldn't be worried that an AI is going to take my job in 6 months. I personally would not be. But I would say, keep an eye, keep your ears on the streets, keep following along, because our industry is going to shift, and you just need to be ready to make that pivot with it. So that would be my feedback for you. All right?
Thank you.
Definitely. Where in the world is... Yeah. All right. We have another question up in the queue. Did I lose my moderator? I probably went back down. All right. So I'll take one, Zen, and then I'll...
Yeah, Bobby. I just have a quick question, because there was 2 other people asked earlier the question. I myself curious to know about the answer. That's why. Someone asked, do you have any specific newsletter that we should subscribe to? That was being asked by Shan. That was a good question. I want to know as well. The other person asked Milka. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. Like, how can I practice to talk about my code effectively? I'm struggling with that too. Sometimes I forgot like what I even write sometimes, or I'm explaining it, but then, the recruiter just kind of like, okay, but maybe not the way they want to hear it. Like, how could I improve it in that when I'm actually interviewing as well? So those are not my questions, but those are questions somebody else asked. But I just curious myself too.
So I'm going to
thanks.
ask the latter first, answer the latter first, and then I'll talk about the newsletters because I can actually include that in the follow-up email to everybody, at least the top 3 that I follow. So the second part of the second question was sometime I write code and I forget what I write. How do I start to work on this skill set to be able to explain my code? So one of the things that I always find candidates not do is read their code out loud. It's almost as if they do silent reading and then they try to piece the pieces together. One of the most effective ways of talking about your code is actually reading it out loud. Variable name equals whatever that is and continue. Function defined as this. It takes in these 2 parameters. This is an integer. This is a Boolean. It goes and adds this integer to that integer. It uses a function, a library that called this. Like, talking about your code will help you explain it more. Not that you're going to read through it. It's almost like you're reading an essay. All right, let me give a synopsis or no. What I'm saying is when you become really effective is you just start to read your code and then you just explain to me how and why you decide this. It's like we have a decision point. All right. Let's say that I'm writing something and I find out that recursion would be the best thing to use, right? Recursion is always one of the last things to use in my opinion, but whatever. And just reading through the code out loud and getting to a point where it's like, oh man, what if I were to use recursion in this place versus writing all this other code that does the same thing over again? You know what? Let me go ahead and, add some comments about, hey, I would rather prefer to use recursion in this line, so on and so forth. That's what I mean by talking about your code out loud and really just being able to explain what's going on. Number 1, read your code. Go ahead and read it out loud so you can hear it. And then you start to talk about it and think about it and then having some type of input afterwards. Hopefully that gives you some insights.
It did. Thank you, Bobby. And whoever asked a question, feel free to jump in. And if you want to follow up from Bobby, thanks.
For sure. Now, when it comes to the newsletters, there is a few newsletters that I personally follow. Morning Brew, I don't know if you've ever heard of them. It's an email mailing list that they send out emails about the overall just tech industry. And they have sub blog or newsletters that they post out every day. Every day I'm getting something new. The other one that's really cool, especially around system design, and hopefully I'm pronouncing it right, is Byte Go. It's by the engineer that wrote the book around design interviews. He actually used to work at Twitter at some time also. But him and a few of his colleagues do daily posts, almost YouTube videos and LinkedIn posts and blog posts about system design. And they have a really cool way of artistically showing it. And like I said, they have YouTube videos where they're talking about it. One of the most powerful ones that he's published is what is an API. I was like, oh my gosh, I wish everybody got this, right? And it's a blog post that I subscribe to. And I was like, yo, this is something that everybody needs to be following along, especially if you are talking about system design or in that phase of interviews. But in general, I'll definitely post and send it out a little bit more afterwards. Go ahead and ask your question while I am typing. I'm going to see if I can find it.
Oh, hello, Bobby. Since you bring up system design, could you show up some good resources to learn system design?
For sure. Actually, I just open my browser. Hopefully I can still see my browser here. So this is it right here. Give me a thumbs up if you can see my Google search. Yep, maybe. All right, thumbs up. There we go. I'm going to go to their blog post there. This is the engineers, or actually this is their site, but they also offer blog posts. But this is the engineer that wrote the book. He used to work at Twitter and definitely has some real cool insights into design strategies. But if you click on a newsletter here at the top, let's go to no thank you. And let me look if I can find that API one. Here we go. Oh no, that says why are API popular? So proxy. All right, but we'll just click on this one. Why APIs are popular. But as you can see, there's a YouTube video here to talk to you about APIs with some designs and with some kind of visual effect of understanding the values around APIs. And if you scroll down, it gets into more details of understanding common RESTful calls, the different type of ways of using and accessing APIs, and providers of different APIs. This is a really cool one, is actually the URI structure of APIs. But in general, this is what I'm talking about, staying on the streets and very up to date on what's going on in the industry and what conversation points will be really cool during an interview. So hopefully that helps out. And I'm going to copy this and put it in the chat so that you'll all have it. And definitely I'll send some more stuff out afterwards if you all are interested in picking up some more skill sets. But yes, they have a daily newsletter. All right. I don't know who came in first, so whoever opens their mic first and says hi goes.
Hi.
There you go.
I came in a bit late and my audio was, not cooperating.
No
So
worries.
I did put in the chat if this recording is going to be sent out to us or not. Is it?
Yes. Thank you for that plug. We will definitely be sending this recording out afterwards. The other thing is that there will be a survey, so you have to fill out the survey, and then after the survey, the recording will be sent out afterwards. So please do take the time to fill out the survey.
Thank you.
All right, we got 2 more people in the queue.
Hello, Bobby. Since you mentioned system design,
Yes.
Could you show us some good resource to learn more about it?
So this is the resource that I would definitely highly recommend for system design. Is here. And you know what? CodePath has we just released some interview prep interview preparation. Actually, it's a career kit. That's what it's called. And I actually wrote a section called technical interviewing. And there's definitely some more details around certain resources that I recommend. This is the repository right here around system design that I would highly recommend you to take a look at. And then there's some other resources in general that we offer when you dive deeper into, let's say, how to prepare. If you scroll down, there's a few checklists that we drafted and created. But in general, this would be one of those resources that I will drop in the chat room, and definitely highly recommend you take a look. All right.
And for example, for lead code, we can confidently say that like we can do 250 problem around that or less, and then we're done with it, because the other problem will be the same. But like, how is it for system design? Like when can we say like we have learned enough so we can move on to other things, to more helpful things?
So the best way I would say is mock interviewing to gauge where you're at in the system design portion of your skill set you're developing. But a lot of the things that come out of system design is when you actually go and implement some of these things, that's when you really are at that point. So it is a little bit more rigor in terms of execution. Like lead code, as you execute and solve these problems, you do 200, you should be good. I mean, I'm just saying what you're saying. I mean, in general, for system design, executing on some of these design strategies, or really writing code to build an API, and then writing and creating some of those URIs and versioning and methods, and just really starting understanding that low-level stuff requires you to get your hands dirty. And I would say that actually doing that work is the more better way to build up proficiency. Sorry.
Thank you.
All right. So next up, Alexandra. Yes, no, maybe so. All right. Whoever has their hand up.
I'm sorry, I was muted. Yeah, I was wondering how soon I should apply again to companies that either do not select me or just do not respond to me.
Yeah. So first of all, I'm sad to hear that company are not responding back to you, because that's one of the worst things in the world, is never to hear anything back. And don't think that that's everybody in the industry, and don't think there's something wrong with you. All right. The next thing is that if you apply for a company and they said no, how long before you apply for the next one? I would definitely take a look at the recruiting website to see if there's anything notated on there. What I've seen professionally in the past is that they usually have 6 months to a year before you can reapply. But that's what I've seen. I haven't read that as of late on any website, but in the past, that's what I've seen is usually 6 months to a year for you to be reconsidered for a position. But I would say in terms of hearing it from the horse's mouth is finding out from the company in some capacity. But I highly recommend to reapply. This is the one thing that most cohorts candidates don't realize is like, especially let's say you worked at a company like Twitter. Some people have interviewed and gone through the interview process 2 to 3 times before they get in. So just because you don't get in now doesn't mean like, oh, I can never work for that company. It's just like right now the skill sets are not there. Like come back in 6 months to a year from now and then we re-interview you again. So don't hesitate to reapply, but I would definitely give it some time and continue to develop in those skills. Hopefully that answers your question.
Okay, thank you. Because I think I misanswered a question earlier. Most of my several interviews have been with engineering companies, and some of them I reapplied to like 3 weeks after I didn't hear back.
For sure, for sure. Like I said, it's not a normal practice for companies to ghost candidates, but unfortunately you will run into it. But I would say if you let's say that you go there 3 to 6 months from now and the job position is still there, apply again. And just, put your name in the hat and let them know that you're still interested. And if you still do have access or have the recruiter or hiring manager contact that originally reached out, 3 to 6 months afterwards is definitely sufficient time to ping them again and be like, hey, is that opportunity still available? Especially if that job posting is still listed on their website.
Okay, thank you.
For sure, for sure. All right, let me look in the queue to see if there are any questions. How soon should I apply again for a company? Oh, we already answered that. Is it appropriate for Glassdoor? Yep, we already answered that. Practice talking about my code effective. We talked about that. On fellow IT and newsletters. We talked about newsletters. All right, next person, whoever unmics their mic fast.
Hi, Bobby. My name is Milka. I have a quick question, and it's to follow up. I had asked about how to practice my code effectively. So my next question is that how can I confidently explain my code? Because I was doing a problem and I had to articulate my code and how I would solve it. However, I was very nervous. And I was doing a lot of stuttering, and I think that jeopardized my opportunity to go to the next round.
Yeah, for sure. And don't feel in terms of you don't have the capacity to do it. It's just during that moment, during that stress, during that examination, like you were not able to get it out as fast and communicate it your best effective way. But how do you get better at that? You get better at that by practicing talking about your code. Like write something and go explain it to somebody that may have a little bit of interest in coding, and then go explain it to somebody that doesn't have no interest in coding, even if it goes over their head. But if at the end of it, they could tell you a little bit about what's going on in the code, that means you are effectively communicating what your code does. And that will also help reduce the anxiety that you feel when somebody says, hey, can you tell me why? And it's like you being able to practice that is going to make you more effective at talking about it. The reason why this is a real cool skill is when you start to work on a team, you will be in scenarios in the meeting that may require you to explain why you wrote a function or why you wrote something in certain ways, right? And what we're really seeing is how do you handle pressure like that? Like, tell me why you did this. And if you have a really, laid back, commonly, people ask me to talk about my code all the time. Yeah. So the reason why, like, if you have that, that's a gem in our industry, right? So it's not only you that it's a challenge for being able to explain a code, especially under pressure. I've seen it happen many times where senior engineers fumble and can't put their words together. And then at the end of the day, you're like, well, how in the world did they write it? It was just because of that moment right there. It was just so much pressure. So definitely practice talking about your code, talk to people that don't know what's going on, and just see their results, and then continue to practice. That would be my recommendation, so that you can become fluent, especially when the time presents itself. Does that make sense?
Yes, I feel so much better now. Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
For sure, for sure. All right, we got one. All right, let me read one question here. Any resources to learn how to use Git? Ooh, I think actually on that blog post that I posted earlier, if my Zoom thingy will not do, oh, come on, Zoom. No. Let me see if I can show. There we go. There was a blog post that I seen on this site here just the other day about Git workflow. This is actually a really, really good diagram to talk about right here, how to use Git in a production work environment, because this is actually how we did it at a number of places I worked at, is the same process of checking out code from the repository, working on it as a developer locally, and then finding a way to publish it back into the centralized repository, requiring a community to kind of approve it. Everybody give you a +1, and then it gets merged into the main branch, and then from the main branch, it gets pushed out to production. But in terms of just working with Git, this definitely is a good blog post to talk some more about it, and hopefully can give you some more stuff on that. So definitely. All right, we still have one more person with their hand waved or up, but I will read another question. Go ahead. Whoever opens their mic first.
I just put my question in the chat. Like, do you have any advice for what we should do when we get quote unquote ghosted? So like, should we send the recruiter an email or a LinkedIn message, or like both?
Yeah, so how would I handle it? So there was this thing that we used to do all the time back in the days when I first started interviewing, is you have a cover letter, you have a resume, and then you have a thank you letter. Cover letters, barely used anymore. Resume, we still use resumes, but not at the same way that we used them back in the days, because you have LinkedIn. But thank you letters, I would almost use a thank you letter as a way to re-engage anyone that's tried to ghost you. I don't know if you do it already. If you are doing it, that's cool that you're still maintaining that practice. But if you're not doing it, if any company ghosts me, I'm writing them a thank you letter. Like, hey, I'm saying, if I have the recruiter, the hiring manager, if I can find people's email addresses, I'll CC them, and I will just say, hey, thank you for the opportunity interviewing at XYZ company for this position. I'm really interested and still interested in the opportunity. I know that you all may be busy and having challenges of reaching out with, following up with candidates, but I'm still here looking forward for us to move things forward. Blah, 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 blah. Here goes a link to my resume if you lost it. Thank you so much. Have a great day. It's Bobby Dorless type stuff. And I would send that out either through LinkedIn, or preferably through email, because it's kind of like a letter. But I would also send it through LinkedIn in that same type of format, where I'm thanking them for the opportunity and almost kind of like guilting them into letting me know what's going on, right? That would be a practice that I would put in. And at the end of the day, if you reach out like that and you still don't receive no feedback, then it's already time for you to move on, and maybe check out their site in 3 to 6 months. But then that's also maybe a reason not to work for a company like that if they can't follow up with the candidate, because that may show some of their practices internally. So that would be my recommendation, is take advantage of an old thing that we used to do, which is thank you letter. Send them one more message, thanking them for the opportunity. Big shout outs to, the engineers that I interviewed with. Here goes my resume if you lost it. Let me know if we can move things forward, and then keep moving. That would be my recommendation.
Thank you, Bobby.
For sure, for sure. All right. I think we are definitely at the end. I got one more question. Oh no, we already did that one. Then inform you won't move forward for a position, but mention they will information submitted. Okay, so there was one question. This is actually a real cool one. It says, what do companies mean when they inform you that they won't be moving forward for a position, but mentioned they will retain your information if a suitable position becomes available. Now, one cool thing about this is that there are some companies that you interview for and you basically, or you potentially interviewed for the wrong position, or you interviewed or showcased a skill set that they may have available and a different opportunity, or they want to make sure that they have a list of resumes or resources that could potentially fulfill positions that may come available in the future. The thing that I want you to take here is that this is a +1. This is of, hey, we don't have nothing for you now. We really enjoy conversating with you. You showcase some skill sets, but this position right now is not the one for you. We're going to keep your information on file, and if something comes up, you're at the top of the stack. That's the way that I've always interpreted information like this, and I don't walk away feeling like, hey, I wasn't good enough. It's more or less the position itself wasn't the right one for me. If something comes up, they can reach back out. So that's the way that I would treat that type of message from a recruiter or from a hiring manager. All right, all right. All right, so it looks like we are at time. I definitely want to give a big shout outs to the recruiting team, the Career Center team here. We're here as resources for you, from career coaching to resume review, LinkedIn, and in general, we're here to just give you as much advice that we have from being in the industry, from whatever lens we come from. Me from tech, Catalina from recruiting and HR, and then Kelsey, Anthony, and Geneva from their specific capacity that they bring to the table. As we close out, I definitely want to remind you that you will get a survey at the end of this recording, so please feel free to fill it out. We're always looking to make these sessions more informative, make them more better. And then after you fill that out, look out for an email for me providing 2 resources, more specifically around more newsletters. If there are any that comes to mind, because I did mention 2, but I'll definitely include them. And then I think that was the only thing. If I did forget something, please email me and let me know. Sometimes I lose track of all the stuff that I'm supposed to do. But anyways, I really appreciate you coming through, hanging out with me for an hour. I hope this information is very informative. The recording, definitely take a look at it. And as you continue on this journey, keep pushing. You got the skills. Thank you so much again for pulling up. Y'all have a great evening. Man, I usually have some music outro, but I don't have the music ready today. Let me see. Maybe a little bit. Thank you all for coming through. We really appreciate you.